1 minute ago, a confrontation erupted behind palace walls, sharp, controlled, and deeply personal. Prince William reportedly challenged King Charles directly over a quiet arrangement involving Royal Lodge and Camilla's family. No press release, no ceremony, just a line crossed. Insiders say this wasn't a disagreement, it was a breaking point, and once those words were spoken, there was no undoing what followed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What makes this moment so volatile is not volume, but velocity. The confrontation didn't build slowly through layers of aids or polite memoranda. It arrived fully formed, decisive, and impossible to misinterpret. Those present describe a shift in the room the instant Royal Lodge was mentioned not as property, but as principle. In royal life, certain subjects are understood to be radioactive, and Royal Lodge sits squarely among them, heavy with symbolism, legacy, and the unspoken rules that govern who benefits from proximity to the crown. By raising it directly, William wasn't questioning logistics, he was questioning judgment. The alleged arrangement involving Camilla's family had been framed quietly, tucked into routine planning where few eyes linger. That silence is precisely what made it dangerous. Insiders suggest William saw in the deal a pattern. He has long resisted incremental decisions that, taken together, tilt the future without ever announcing themselves. It wasn't the size of the concession that alarmed him, but the precedent it set. Once lines blur, they rarely sharpen on their own. What stunned aides most was the method. William did not delegate. He did not soften the message through intermediaries. He chose proximity and clarity, confronting Charles face to face, signaling that the stakes were too high for diffusion. In that choice was urgency, and in that urgency was a warning. The heir was no longer content to observe from the margins, while decisions accumulated consequences. The atmosphere reportedly tightened as the implications settled. This was not a son airing a grievance, but a future king asserting guardianship over the institution he will inherit. Immediate tension followed, the kind that doesn't shout but freezes. Advisors recalibrated in real time, aware that the confrontation had collapsed the comfortable distance between planning and accountability. Words once considered administrative now carried moral weight. Every pause suggested calculation. Every response risked escalation. The room understood, even if nothing more was said aloud, that the moment had crossed from private concern into institutional reckoning, and beneath it all ran a deeper current foreshadowing. If this confrontation could surface without warning, what else had been quietly accumulating? If Royal Lodge could trigger such a response, what did that imply about future decisions still hidden in plain sight? The sense among those watching was unmistakable. This was not an isolated flare, but the ignition of something larger. A signal that the era of unchallenged arrangements was ending. To understand why William reacted so forcefully, we must understand what Royal Lodge truly represents. Royal Lodge is not just a residence, it is leverage. Control over it signals favour, legacy, and future influence. For decades, every decision tied to the property has been politically charged. So when whispers emerged that Camilla's family might gain access or advantage through it, alarms didn't just ring, they screamed. Within the monarchy, Royal Lodge has always existed in a category of its own, less a home than a chess piece. Its walls carry the memory of past compromises and quiet trades, moments when proximity translated into power long before the public noticed the shift. Those who understand the institution know that controlling Royal Lodge is not about comfort, it is about continuity. It signifies who is trusted with the future and who is merely passing through the present. That is why even the slightest change in its status has historically triggered anxiety, suspicion, and sharp internal resistance. The sensitivity runs deep because Royal Lodge has repeatedly served as a boundary marker. When the Crown assigns it, it is not simply allocating space, it is declaring intent. Temporary use implies convenience. Long-term positioning implies inheritance of influence. Insiders say this distinction is everything. A short stay can be framed as practical. A sustained presence, however, begins to rewrite assumptions about who matters, who benefits, and who is being quietly elevated within the royal ecosystem. Property inside the monarchy is never neutral, it is currency. Access becomes leverage in future negotiations, a silent advantage that compounds over time. Those who occupy such spaces gain more than privacy. They gain visibility, proximity to decision-making, and the unspoken legitimacy that comes with being seen as part of the inner circle. That is why any reassignment, especially one touching Royal Lodge, inevitably ignites internal conflict. It threatens to rearrange hierarchies without ever announcing that a change has occurred. According to insiders, the whispers involving Camilla's family set off a chain reaction because they suggested more than hospitality. They hinted at positioning. Even if framed as provisional, the optics alone carried weight. William reportedly saw in this the same slow drift he has worked to counter a pattern where incremental accommodations quietly harden into permanent realities. For him, the danger was not just the deal itself, but the signal it sent about whose interests were being protected and whose were being tested. What made this a red line was timing and trajectory. At a moment when the monarchy is acutely aware of public scrutiny and internal cohesion, any move that appears to consolidate advantage around one branch risks destabilizing the whole structure. Insiders suggest William understood that once Royal Lodge became a bargaining chip for extended family, the institution would struggle to reclaim it as a neutral asset. The cost of reversing such decisions, historically, has always been higher than the cost of preventing them. That strategic calculation, cold, institutional and forward-looking, is what reportedly transformed concern into confrontation. Royal Lodge, in William's view, was not just about today's arrangement, it was about tomorrow's balance of power. And when leverage shifts quietly, those who inherit the consequences rarely get a second chance to correct it. And that brings us to the deal that reportedly ignited William's fury. According to palace sources, the arrangement wasn't announced because it wasn't meant to be debated, framed as logistical, presented as minor, but buried inside the details was a shift that could permanently benefit Camilla's family without public scrutiny or future reversal. Insiders describe a process that unfolded quietly, almost clinically, as if the absence of noise could neutralize the magnitude of the move. The language, they say, was intentionally narrow. No grand declarations, no ceremonial paperwork that might trigger wider consultation. Instead, the arrangement was packaged as a practical adjustment and efficiency. A convenience something too small to warrant attention. That framing mattered. In the monarchy, what is labelled logistical often slips past the safeguards designed to protect balance and precedent. Those familiar with the details claim the structure of the deal avoided traditional checkpoints on purpose. Rather than moving through established advisory channels, it relied on a tight circle of approvals, minimizing the number of people who could question its implications. By the time the broader institution might have noticed, the arrangement would already be in motion, normalized, embedded, and far harder to unwind. That is the danger of quiet deals. Once they exist, reversing them becomes an admission of error few are willing to make. Sources allege that internal support came from figures who viewed the move as harmless, or at least defensible. Some reportedly believed it would ease family tensions, others saw it as a way to extend courtesy without consequence. But critics inside the palace argue that this is precisely how influence shifts through gestures that appear benign, while reshaping access and advantage behind the scenes. In this case, the beneficiaries were not abstract. They were Camilla's relatives, positioned to gain proximity, legitimacy, and the subtle power that comes from being associated with a protected royal asset. What made the arrangement especially alarming, according to insiders, was how it bypassed consultation with those responsible for long-term planning. No broad discussion about precedent. No formal assessment of future implications. The assumption seemed to be that once implemented, the arrangement would be treated as settled fact. Quiet permanence is a powerful tool. It transforms a temporary decision into an inherited reality, one that future leaders are expected to accept rather than challenge. Early signs that the deal could not be easily undone emerged almost immediately. Language in internal documents emphasized continuity. Timelines blurred. Exit clauses were vague. Each detail reduced flexibility, tightening the knot around a decision that had never been openly tested. For those paying attention, the message was unmistakable. This was not meant to be revisited. It was meant to stand. That is why, when the full scope became clear, concern hardened into alarm. The issue was no longer about accommodation or family harmony. It was about process, authority, and the quiet redrawing of boundaries. Insiders say this is where the emotional temperature shifted, where patience was exhausted by the realization that silence had been mistaken for consent. When William learned the full scope of the arrangement, restraint gave way to confrontation. This wasn't about paperwork, it was about principle. Insiders say William saw the deal as a violation not just of fairness, but of everything he believes the monarchy must protect going forward. The future king didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He did something far more dangerous. He spoke plainly. Those close to William say this issue cut deep, because it touched a nerve he has guarded for years. The fear that quiet favoritism erodes public trust faster than open conflict ever could. From his perspective, the arrangement wasn't merely an administrative misstep. It was a signal that rules could bend when proximity and influence converged, and that long-standing safeguards might be bypassed without consequence. William has watched how public confidence fractures not in dramatic collapses, but through subtle inconsistencies that accumulate until legitimacy feels negotiable. This, he believed, was one of those moments. Sources suggest the emotional weight of the confrontation stemmed from William's sense of responsibility toward the future, not resentment toward the past. He is said to view legitimacy as something fragile, inherited but never guaranteed, and fiercely dependent on the appearance of fairness. Any move that hinted at preferential treatment for one branch of the family, especially tied to property and access, threatened to undermine the credibility he knows he must one day defend. In that context, silence would have been complicity, and William has never been willing to carry that burden. What made the confrontation especially stark, insiders say, was William's decision to address Charles directly rather than through advisors or intermediaries. That choice alone signaled how serious the matter had become. Protocol exists to soften edges, to create distance, to prevent emotion from breaching hierarchy. William bypassed it. Not out of disrespect, but out of urgency. He reportedly believed that filtered language would dilute the message, and that this was a moment that demanded clarity over comfort. Those present describe a moment when protocol quietly fractured, not dramatically, not publicly, but unmistakably. William, calm but unyielding, laid out his concerns without euphemism. He spoke about perception, about precedent, about how easily today's quiet deal becomes tomorrow's institutional problem. This was not an accusation, it was a warning, and warnings, when delivered without ceremony, carry a different kind of force. The emotional intensity came not from anger, but from disappointment that such a deal had advanced far enough to require confrontation at all. William is said to have framed the issue as a crossroads, one path reinforcing consistency and restraint, the other inviting suspicion and future fracture. By speaking plainly, he accepted the risk that the disagreement could no longer remain private. That too was a choice. And in making it, insiders believe William understood the stakes. Once a future king challenges a sitting monarch on principle, the dynamic shifts. The conversation stops being internal housekeeping and starts becoming something larger, a test of values, authority, and direction. It was no longer just about a lodge or a family arrangement. It was about the kind of monarchy that would emerge from moments like this. But confronting a king has consequences, especially when the king is your father. King Charles was forced into an impossible position: defend the deal and risk alienating his heir, or retreat and undermine his authority. Those present say the silence that followed William's words was louder than any argument, because in that pause, the monarchy's future hung in balance. For Charles, the confrontation collapsed two identities into one unforgiving moment. As a father, he faced the unmistakable resolve of a son who believes legitimacy is earned daily and lost quietly. As a king, he confronted the reality that authority, once questioned by an heir apparent, cannot be restored with ceremony alone. Insiders describe a man weighing not just outcomes, but optics, how a single decision would echo through corridors already sensitive to whispers of favoritism and fracture. Reversing the arrangement, sources say, would have sent an immediate signal of weakness. Not weakness of character, but weakness of command. It would suggest that pressure, especially pressure from within, could force a retreat, inviting future challenges from advisors, relatives, and institutions, testing the boundaries of influence. Charles understands precedent. He knows that once a line bends, it rarely snaps back straight. In that sense, conceding would not end the conflict, it would relocate it. Yet defending the deal carried a sharper, more personal cost. To stand firm would risk cementing a breach of trust with the very person meant to inherit not just the crown, but the confidence of the public. William's concern, as conveyed in that room, was not framed as rebellion but as stewardship. Ignoring it would communicate that stewardship takes a back seat to accommodation, and that message, once absorbed, does not fade. It calcifies. Those present recall the emotional undercurrents as restrained but heavy. Charles did not interrupt. He did not counter with justification. He listened, and in listening, he absorbed the weight of an accusation never spoken aloud. That favor, even when unintended, can look like corruption when it benefits one branch of the family at the expense of the institution's credibility. For a monarch already navigating skepticism, the timing could not have been worse. Complicating everything was the unspoken calculus of loyalty. Any perception that Camilla's family received preferential treatment would not be judged in isolation. It would be folded into years of public scrutiny, magnified by distrust, and weaponized by critics eager for proof of imbalance. Charles is acutely aware that love, when linked to advantage, invites suspicion. And suspicion, once seeded, grows faster than any rebuttal. What followed, insiders suggest, was not resolution but recognition. Recognition that there would be a cost no matter the path chosen. Recognition that the exchange had shifted something fundamental between father and son. Recognition that delay itself had become a decision, and that decisions deferred tend to surface later with greater force. In that moment, Charles stood at the intersection of legacy and immediacy, knowing that whichever way he turned, the ground behind him would never look the same. And hovering over the confrontation was the figure at the center of it all, Camilla. No accusations were spoken aloud, but everyone understood the implication. How much influence is too much? And when does support become overreach? For years, whispers about Camilla's family have circulated quietly. This confrontation dragged those whispers into the open. In the aftermath, the atmosphere inside the palace reportedly shifted from controlled tension to something far more uneasy. What had once lived in the margins, concerns murmured in corridors, questions raised and quickly dismissed, now felt unavoidable. Camilla's family, insiders say, has always occupied a uniquely sensitive space within the royal ecosystem, not because of proven wrongdoing, but because proximity itself alters perception. Access becomes influence, familiarity becomes leverage, and in an institution built on distance, that closeness is combustible. Those close to the situation describe a long-standing awareness that even well-intentioned support can look like preferential treatment when viewed through the monarchy's unforgiving lens. Past concerns, rarely documented and never formalized, centered on access, who was seen, who was heard, and who appeared to move more freely than tradition might allow. Each instance, taken alone, was dismissible. Together, they formed a pattern that made senior aides uneasy, even as they struggled to articulate why. William's framing of the risk, sources suggest, was measured but unyielding. He did not accuse, he contextualized. He spoke about erosion rather than scandal, about the slow bleed of credibility that happens when boundaries blur. In his view, the danger was not a single decision, but the accumulation of quiet advantages that, once normalized, become impossible to reverse. Perception, he emphasized, carries the same weight as reality in a monarchy that survives on trust. That emphasis landed heavily. Advisors reportedly felt the discomfort ripple outward, not because the claims were explosive, but because they were plausible. The room understood that even the suggestion of blurred lines could be as damaging as proof. In an age where narratives harden quickly, the palace cannot afford ambiguity, especially when it involves property, privilege, and family ties. What made the moment particularly volatile was the recognition that no clear rule had been broken. That absence of violation offered no comfort. It instead underscored a more unsettling truth, that influence often operates in the spaces between rules, where intention and impact diverge. For aides tasked with protecting the institution, this grey area is the most dangerous terrain of all. As the conversation settled, a sense of collective realization took hold. The palace was no longer dealing with a hypothetical risk. It was confronting a question of governance: who sets limits, how those limits are enforced, and whether tradition can withstand modern scrutiny when relationships complicate the map. The silence that followed was not agreement, but acknowledgement. Something had been exposed, and it could not be unseen. Once the confrontation ended, the palace had to decide what came next. Meetings were called. Language was reassessed. Advisors moved quickly not to explain, but to contain. Because once word of the confrontation began circulating internally, the danger wasn't exposure. It was fracture. Within minutes, according to those familiar with the response, the palace slipped into a state of controlled urgency. This was not crisis management as the public understands it. There were no statements drafted, no spokespeople briefed, no lines prepared for journalists. Instead, the focus turned inward. Who knew what? Who had heard what? And more critically, who might talk? The fear wasn't that the story would leak fully formed. It was that fragments would escape, incomplete and combustible, eroding trust long before facts could catch up. Emergency discussions unfolded behind closed doors, described by insiders as tense and unusually direct. Senior aides weighed the risks of silence against the risks of denial, and found both wanting. A public rejection of the confrontation would invite scrutiny. A confirmation would legitimize it. So nothing was said. Silence once again became policy not because it resolved anything, but because it bought time in a moment when time felt dangerously thin. That silence, however, came at a cost. Without a unified explanation, internal factions began quietly interpreting events through their own lenses. Some saw the confrontation as overdue. Others viewed it as destabilizing. The absence of a public denial was read not as neutrality, but as uncertainty. And uncertainty inside the monarchy is corrosive. It invites speculation. It encourages camps. It turns loyalty into calculation. Efforts were made to reframe the situation quietly. The arrangement itself, sources suggest, was softened in language and slowed in execution, not reversed outright. Words like temporary, exploratory, and non-binding began appearing in internal discussions, even if they hadn't before. The goal was not resolution, it was diffusion. Reduce the temperature, lower the stakes, make the issue smaller than it already was. But for many inside the palace, that tactic only confirmed what William had feared, that once a line is crossed, retreat becomes a matter of optics, not principle. As advisors maneuvered, something subtler shifted. Control of the narrative began to change hands. Where once decisions flowed downward with quiet authority, Now they were being questioned, passed, and stress-tested. Not openly, not rebelliously, but cautiously. Trust, once assumed, now required reinforcement. And reinforcement takes time the institution rarely grants itself. The most unsettling realization, insiders say, was not that the confrontation had happened, but that it had exposed how fragile internal cohesion had become. The monarchy depends on consensus that never looks like consensus. It depends on shared restraint, on unspoken agreements, on the belief that everyone is moving toward the same future, even when they disagree on the path. That belief had taken a hit, and in that moment, amid the urgency and the recalibration, one truth settled heavily across the palace. Even if this confrontation never reached the public, its effects already had. The damage was not loud, it was structural, and repairing it would require more than silence. But beyond the immediate damage, a deeper issue had been exposed. Insiders say this moment wasn't reactive, it was declarative. William wasn't just confronting a deal. He was defining the limits of his future reign. And those limits did not include quiet favoritism or inherited privilege disguised as practicality. What followed that confrontation, sources suggest, was not retreat or damage control, but something far more consequential: recalibration. William's decision to challenge the arrangement didn't simply interrupt a process, it reframed how he is now viewed inside the institution. No longer just the patient heir waiting for his moment, he emerged as an active force drawing lines in real time. The message was unmistakable. Certain practices that once survived on silence and deference would not carry forward unexamined, and those who relied on tradition to justify convenience felt the shift immediately. Within palace walls, the confrontation began circulating not as a family dispute, but as a statement of intent. Advisors took note. Senior aides reassessed assumptions. The quiet understanding that some decisions could be made without scrutiny so long as they were framed as logistical was suddenly unstable. William's stance suggested a future where process would matter as much as outcome, and where proximity to power would no longer guarantee insulation from challenge. For some, this was unsettling. For others, overdue. The shift in internal power dynamics was subtle but real. Those aligned with transparency and long-term legitimacy found their influence quietly strengthened. Voices that had previously urged caution over optics gained traction. At the same time, individuals accustomed to operating in grey areas felt exposed. Not publicly, not yet, but internally, their margin for maneuver narrowed. Influence didn't vanish overnight, but it became conditional, contingent on alignment with a different vision of governance. Emotionally, the moment carried weight beyond strategy. William's confrontation signaled a personal reckoning with the legacy he intends to inherit. Insiders say it reflected years of private observation, watching how small concessions accumulate, how exceptions become expectations, how public trust erodes not through scandal, but through patterns. This was not about one property or one family. It was about preventing a future where legitimacy is questioned, because boundaries were never enforced when it mattered most. The ominous undertone lies in what this implies going forward. If this was the first visible line drawn, it will not be the last. Those close to William believe he understands that defining authority early invites resistance, but postponing it guarantees regret. The confrontation, then, was less an end than a beginning. A warning shot across a system long accustomed to quiet compromise. And as the dust settled, one truth lingered inside the palace. This exchange changed how the future king is calculated. Not softer, not louder, but firmer, more resolved. And for an institution built on continuity, that kind of internal evolution can be the most destabilizing force of all. Which leads to the final unsettling question now facing the monarchy. This confrontation may never be officially acknowledged, but inside the palace, it has already altered the landscape. A future king challenged a reigning one. A deal was questioned. And the illusion of quiet unity cracked, perhaps for good. What lingers now is not the heat of the exchange, but its aftershock. Long after voices lowered and doors closed, the implications kept moving, quietly and relentlessly, through every layer of royal governance. This was not a moment that could be undone with a revised memo or softened by silence. It exposed a fault line that had always existed, but was rarely tested so openly: the tension between continuity and correction, between inherited authority and earned legitimacy. And once exposed, such fractures do not simply disappear. Insiders suggest that the deal itself may survive in form, but never again in comfort. Scrutiny has changed its weight. Every future discussion tied to it now carries the echo of that confrontation. The unspoken awareness that decisions once made discreetly can now be challenged directly. That alone reshapes governance. It forces caution where confidence once reigned. It replaces assumption with calculation, and it leaves unresolved tension humming beneath the surface, a constant reminder that alignment between father and son is no longer guaranteed. The emotional cost of that tension is harder to measure, but no less real. Silence has settled in where certainty once lived. Conversations are more careful. Words are chosen with an awareness of how quickly loyalty can be tested by principle. The monarchy, so often presented as immovable, reveals itself instead as something far more human, fragile in its relationships, vulnerable in its transitions, dependent not just on tradition, but on trust. And trust, once strained, rarely returns to its original shape. What this moment reveals about the modern monarchy is unsettling and clarifying all at once. Power is no longer exercised purely through hierarchy. It is negotiated through values. The future king is not waiting patiently for change to arrive. He is actively shaping the conditions under which he will rule. That reality forces the institution to confront an uncomfortable truth. The next era will not be defined by silence as strategy alone. It will be defined by how conflict is managed, acknowledged, or buried. For now, silence may indeed be the chosen response. No statements, no corrections, no visible acknowledgement that anything unusual occurred. But silence is not absence, it is containment. And containment only works until the next pressure point emerges. Because this was never just about one property, one family, or one deal. It was about who gets to decide the future and how openly those decisions can be challenged. The final, chilling question remains unanswered. If this confrontation broke through years of restraint, what future deal, what quiet arrangement, what carefully worded decision will trigger the next clash? And when it does, will silence still be enough to hold the monarchy together? Because when a future king confronts power this openly, the real question isn't what was said, but what will happen next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.